From Mark we hear these words. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain, apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could reach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Here ends the reading.
Who is Jesus? That seems to be at least one of the central questions of discipleship. It sure is as we look at the experience of those very first disciples. They spend most, if not all, of the 3 years that they had living with Jesus trying to figure that out. Tom did a wonderful job a couple of weeks ago at pointing our attention to these disciples and the fact that their one shining moment of discipleship was the moment that they said yes, they would follow Jesus. One of the reasons that I place so much faith in the Gospels, in the authenticity of the Gospels and the Gospel message is this. If I was a disciple and if I was just making this stuff up as I went along writing it down, I sure would have made myself look better than those disciples made themselves look. Most of the time, these disciples seem to be out of step, more out of step than in step with what Jesus is doing and why he is doing it. And most of the time, that seems to be because they have already decided who they want Jesus to be. All of the missteps, the misunderstandings, the misspeaking that they do might be explained by the disciples' failure to truly comprehend who Jesus was and is. Even though Jesus repeatedly shocked them with his power and authority, calming the winds and the waves during a storm on the sea, walking on water out to them as they crossed the sea in the middle of the night, feeding thousands and thousands of people with a few loaves of bread and some fish. Even though they watched as Jesus amazed crowds of people with his teaching and healed diseases and touched the untouchable people, even though they saw Jesus take on the religious and political establishment of his day and amaze people with his authority, even though all of this, evidence would suggest that these disciples somehow thought they could tame Jesus. They thought they could use Jesus to accomplish their goals. Does that sound at all familiar? What does Peter say the first time Jesus tells them that the Son of Man must suffer, be rejected, die, and then rise again 3 days later? We're told that Peter took hold of Jesus and began to correct him. "Oh no, Jesus, that's not how it's going to work." But Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking God's thoughts. You are thinking human thoughts." And 6 days later, Jesus asks Peter, James, and John to accompany him on a walk up the mountain. And there they have this amazing experience that we just heard from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is transformed right before their eyes. His clothes glow. He glows. He is joined by 2 others, Moses and Elijah. They are 2 heroes of the faith that stand for the law and the prophets, the 2 shaping pillars within Judaism. Moses and Elijah, whom tradition has taught them, went straight to God upon their death. And these disciples were terrified. They were terrified. At this moment, the veil is lifted. The gloves come off. They see Jesus the Christ in all of his glory, and he is not one who will be tamed or who will be used for their purposes. The person that they see on the mountaintop in that moment is not someone that you can choose to follow when it is convenient for you to follow him. The voice from the cloud says, "This is my son, whom I dearly love. Listen to him." And what is it that Jesus had been saying to them that they didn't want to hear? The Son of Man must suffer, be rejected, be killed, and then 3 days later rise from the dead. And he had been saying, all who want to come after me must say no to themselves, must take up their cross and follow me. All who want to save their lives will lose them, but all who lose their lives because of me and because of the good news will save them. Take up their cross. We've become so familiar, I think, with the cross as a beautiful symbol. We display it in our churches. We wear it around our necks. We even tattoo it on our bodies. We can't seem to get close enough to it that I think we maybe miss the horror of that image that Jesus put in their minds. Those first century disciples couldn't get far enough away from the crosses that were put up in their day. Following Jesus isn't safe. It isn't without risk. It isn't often comfortable. And it isn't without fear. The disciples could attest to that many times over. But so probably can we. I remember when I was in about junior high, my mom started taking these classes at our church, Bethel Bible Study Teacher Training classes. We went to a Lutheran church. Do any of you remember the Bethel Bible Study classes? Yeah, there's a few of you out there that do. We had always gone as a family to church on Sunday mornings. We were always there. On Wednesday nights during Lent, we practiced for the Christmas Children's Program. We were in Sunday school. All of that. My mom helped out with crafts for Vacation Bible School. But all of a sudden, she was going to these classes every Thursday night, 4 hours on a Thursday night every week. She was attending these classes. And she had hours of memorization and homework in between classes. Every so often, she was cramming for a test, and I'll tell you, she would come home madder than a hornet when the pastor who graded the test would mark her punctuation or grammar mistakes with a red pen. I thought that was kind of a jerky thing to do, too. For 2 years, every Thursday night was Bethel class. And that was just the beginning. Out of the 8 or 10 people who took that class, my mom was asked to be one of 3 people who would teach that class to the rest of the people in the congregation. And so from then on, it seemed like most Friday nights she was at her desk researching and writing her lecture for the coming week. You know, I was really quite shocked that she agreed to do that. I could understand her taking the class and wanting to learn what she was learning, but I never had ever seen my mother as a teacher in that light. I didn't know that she would ever want to do anything like that, or that she would have the confidence to do anything like that. And I do remember her asking her one day, we were, just the 2 of us were driving somewhere in the car, and this is probably one of the few intelligent and not self-absorbed questions I asked as a teenager. But I asked her what she had learned from all this study that she was doing. And she thought for a while, and she said, the biggest thing is probably that before these classes, I loved God, but I kind of kept God in a box. And I thought I could open the box when I needed something. Now I realize God isn't in a box. He never was. I don't know for sure, but I think it was that particular realization that led my mom to put herself out there in a way that she had never, ever done before, that allowed her to get up and with confidence teach other adults in her church. And from that point on, she never stopped taking advantage of opportunities to learn more about the Bible, more about Jesus, more about what it means to be a disciple who carries his name. I think it was the transfiguration on the mountaintop with these 3 disciples that has led us to talk about mountaintop experiences in our own lives. These mountaintop experiences can come in a variety of ways. They can come as a dawning realization that Jesus is more than we ever thought, or a sudden revelation that Jesus is more than a friend, more than a teacher, more than a healer, more than a revolutionary, more than a leader, more than a model or a reminder of how we should live our lives, more than a reminder that we should be good and kind people. He is the very Son of God. And as the Son of God, we don't get to make plans for him. He makes plans for us. We are called to listen to him, to align ourselves with his kingdom and follow in his footsteps. And you know what? That should terrify us. That should terrify us, because his footsteps don't lead to the safest places. There is no guarantee that when we align ourselves with Jesus Christ, when we choose to follow him, that we won't suffer, that we won't experience hard things, that we won't get called to step way out of our comfort zones. But if we can remember that his footsteps led not only to a cross, but also to a resurrection, we will have what we need to step beyond our fear. I have sometimes read this account and I've thought, why only Peter, James, and John? Why are they the chosen ones that get to have this amazing mountaintop experience with Jesus? Why are they singled out as special? Why didn't everybody get to go out there? And I wonder if perhaps they were the 3 that needed that experience the most. Maybe they were the ones that had the biggest plans for Jesus. The ones who needed to see that Jesus didn't come to fit into their plans. Jesus came so that they might be part of God's plan. I spent most of last week at a retreat where, as part of the Board of Ordained Ministry for our conference, we were interviewing people who want to be ordained pastors for the United Methodist Church in Minnesota. And I will tell you, this is the hardest work that I do every year. These people have discerned a call to ministry. They have spent years and thousands of dollars getting an education that they need. They will all have written 50 or more pages, some of their deepest thoughts and beliefs. They submit to psychological examinations. And then they come to this retreat where they are interviewed for 3 hours on their personal information, on their leadership abilities, and on their theological understandings. So the candidates arrive at the retreat center the night before the next morning when they have to go through all of these interviews. And we worship with them that night, and we pray for them. And this year I remember one of our board members praying, Jesus, these people are here because you desperately love them. And they desperately love you back. That is the bottom line of discipleship, isn't it, for all of us? We are here because Jesus desperately loves us. And we have answered the call to desperately love Jesus back. We are here because God has desperately loved us enough to allow his Son to die and then rise again for us. Now, I think the only sane response to that is to love God desperately in return, even if it means that there may be a cross in our future, even if it means that we may suffer or find ourselves doing things we never dreamed that we would have to do, all for the sake of Jesus. The bottom line is only love is strong enough to call us to step out beyond our fear. And the same God who sometimes calls us to take chances loves us desperately and powerfully. So we can reach beyond our fears. We can take the risks that Jesus calls us to take, because we know the one who is powerful enough and loving enough to never let us go, no matter where we find ourselves. Is that an amen?